Welcome to the Consultant's Way podcast. I'm Dean McMann, one of your hosts.
And I'm Anthony Paluska. In each episode, we explore the world of consulting professional services through case studies, our own experiences, and interviews with industry leaders.
We're focused on improving individual skills and improving business practices and improving the success of the consulting business.
I think you'll enjoy what we have in store today.
Thank you for joining us today. Our podcast today, we have invited Mike Turner, the Vice President of Professional Services at Upland Software. Mike has extensive experience. Particularly today, we're going to talk about the complexity we all deal with of living in a matrix environment. Mike, tell us a little bit about your background and anything that you think might be relevant for our listeners.
I'm fortunate to have about 20 plus years of consulting and professional services experience, and also spent some time at the University of Colorado Boulder getting a PhD in statistics and a master's degree in process engineering, all of which I leverage in my present role. But we don't need to spend too much time talking about all the great things I've done, because we'll get to some of that as we talk for the rest of the conversation.
Well, Mike, if you don't bring up the great things you've done, we will. I assure you of that. And I love that you have a doctorate in statistics, because someone's got to get that, right? Or we'll have to close the department. So
100%.
Yeah. I mean, one thing I love about Mike, he and I are both really interested in learning and education. So if we get too nerdy, please, we apologize. But, today, many of us live in these matrix environments, and we've got to find a way to make them act and be successful. The very nature of matrix environment is that people don't necessarily report to us and may not even have the same ambitions, goals, measurements.
Yeah. So, Dean, one of the big challenges that I've been faced with in my present role is exactly what you said. I have to influence a large organization, but influence is the key word there. I don't get to necessarily tell people exactly what to do. So the big things that I have worked through is measurement is key. Being able to measure the behaviors that you want to drive and use that information proactively with management is a huge part of the success here. And then the other thing that I'll talk a little bit about is just understanding where the overall organization is going and trying to swim along with the organization and not be a person who keeps bringing up the things that are unimportant to everyone else around you. So it's a combination of measurement, using that measurement for good, and really aligning behind the goals of the overall organization.
Yeah, I think those are two great points that we can spend some time diving into. I think Mike is maybe as a step back to frame everybody, and don't want to spend too much time walking through an org design, but I think it's going to be helpful framing for this conversation so that we can refer to other groups and functions about what they might be measured by or how they look at success or what their goals and objectives are. If you can just paint a little bit of the high level picture of how your organization is structured and where you and your functions sit within that.
So Upland Software is traditionally an acquisition business. We've purchased about 30 software companies over the lifespan of the organization. And we have those businesses arranged in 5 major business units so that you have similar products nested together. Makes for better marketing, makes for better sales motion. Each one of those 5 organizations is managed by a senior vice president and general manager. And their goal is to make money with these products and make customers happy. My job is to be a row, instead of a column. If we think of each one of those as a column in a spreadsheet, my job is to be the row to function across professional services, regardless of the product or business unit, to try to lead to a single level of quality and maybe a single way of being as an organization, so that if someone is a customer of multiple products, they don't have wildly different experiences. So my job as a row is to drive the margins of my department, the sales of my department, but also the things like standards and quality and how our delivery functions at a global level. So while we're aligned, those general managers and myself, in terms of sales and growth of the organization, you can see places where we might not always be in alignment. And that's how our whole organization functions. So while professional services is that way, other major functions are that way as well. So it's just nice to know that things like support or customer success or sales also have rows as well as columns, like I spoke about.
No, I think that's very helpful, and we'll probably refer to them as rows and columns throughout
Yeah,
this
yeah,
to
why
make it
not?
simple
Yeah.
on everybody. So you when you kicked this off and you talked about it, you were on the topic of, well, your first one was measurement, and so maybe we can begin there, and let's talk about some of the key measurement differences and how you view and measure the success of your business, or how you're held accountable, versus how some of those columns are, and where some of those conflict points are, and what one might do about it. But let's just start with some of the key levers, and differences there.
Traditionally, just like most professional services organizations, the key North Star metric is margin. What is the profit margin you're making on your services? So we've spent a lot of time over the 10 plus years of Upland's history talking about costs and talking about revenue. But there's a lot of other things that we haven't paid as close attention to. And a lot of that comes down to just systems and the ability to get data and how to manage that data. And some of those key things beyond margin, one of the big ones is utilization. How much are your folks actually doing the billable work that they're doing or providing value for the organization? And while utilization has always been a key metric in professional services, it can be a little bit difficult to get at when you're such a complicated organization. If you have one product, it might be a whole lot easier to just align behind that one product. But when you have people that are kind of split across products, or maybe even split across business units, it starts to get really hard to get to that particular metric. So utilization has been really key. And then I start getting into kind of some of the other very key metrics that we also haven't paid as close attention to, things like delivery quality, or what's the customer satisfaction of your organization? How well are you actually providing the service you're providing? Things like the efficiency of internal processes as well. But I think probably where we really want to focus is this difference between margin and utilization to start. And I can kind of tell a storyline about how that has helped drive benefit to the organization beyond just professional services.
Yeah, I think that'd be very helpful if you want to dive into that example there, because we know that utilization in the scenario that you just described is a challenge for all of those reasons. You have experts and specialists in some areas, and you're dependent on one of those columns being successful to keep an individual perhaps fully utilized. But you may have an overabundance of business in another area where that person may or may not apply their skills. And there's all these other complexities that exist in trying to manage the utilization of that business while you're at the mercy in some ways of the success and the performance of the columns, so to speak. So yeah, please dive in and share. I know you've had success in improving utilization within your business, so we'd love to spend some time.
And Mike, keep repeating to us these two things you said are so important. One is you're telling them the data before they ask. You're using the data to help them make better decisions. I think that's really important because you're trying to move the organization somewhere, not just make your business better.
So, Dean, this is, and Anthony, these are all really great points. And I think there's a conversation I'd like to just lead in before I get to your question, which is, where does some of that conflict lie between what my organization is attempting to accomplish and how the columns function? Well, anyone who's worked in professional services, especially in SaaS, knows that one of the first things that can get discounted or given away is the professional services. The implementation of software is a much smaller overall dollar value than the licensing fees that you would be selling a customer. And so if you can take a discount on that implementation fee and keep your licenses whole, it's better for the organization. It may not be better for my team because we lose some of our money. We lose that revenue. So you have this conflict, which is, as a general manager, as the head of a column, my job is to make as much money for the organization as I can. More of that money comes out of licenses than comes out of professional services. So of course I want to keep that piece intact. I, on the other hand, who am running a sub business and saying, hey, don't give away my work. I need to hit my margins. And so where we end up here is, how do we have a conversation? How do we meet in a middle ground that both meets the needs of the general manager and ensures the longevity of my department, the people who work for me? So where that turns is the conversation about what my people are doing with the time they have, and that's utilization. and then couple that with margin. Instead of just looking at the finances, let's talk about the value that my people provide, and then have a much more nuanced conversation between the columns and the rows.
Man, I hate to jump out into an accounting issue, but there's been a lot of data and RevRec, and of course, because we serve this industry, that if you discount professional services for software, you can't write it in your accounting department that way. That you can't do that because services is for the very reason they want to do it. Services money is acquired over time. Product money is taken if it's a license and not a SaaS, but it's taken in a different way. And have you run across that particular argument, an issue that's not really according to GAAP? GAAP is generally accepted accounting principles.
Yes, 100%. We've run into this. And of course, as you probably know, there's audit that has to be done to ensure that you're not constantly giving away things and are accounting for them appropriately. And so this can lead to a lot of accounting work on the back end to make sure that you're appropriately accounting for both your services and your software, and that you're not looking like you're giving it all away, even though you are. Now, I will say my organization is pretty good about this, and so we don't have a lot of that issue. But you can still end up with a 5%, 10%, or 15% discount here or there that adds up to a lot of money when you talk about 30 products and something like $12 to $16 million of work a year. You just very quickly add up to a couple of FTE, full-time equivalent individuals worth of money just by giving away 5% at a time. So that leads me to, how do I have that conversation in a meaningful fashion? And the way you do that is by gathering the right information, but not just gathering it. You have to serve it up regularly. You have to give that information before it's asked. If you wait for someone to ask you for it, the information you provide them is already suspect. You've already lost some credibility in your data. Whereas if you serve it up, in my case, I serve it up every Monday morning. Every Monday, I'm creating a new utilization dashboard and providing information to all of my leaders and all of their managers in the columns about what their people are doing, so that when eventually the question gets asked, hey, you don't have enough revenue to support the work you're doing, I can refer back to, I have been giving you this information weekly for quarters.
This is so important. This is so important in any dealing with management and dealing as a professional service person. You've got to give them the data before they ask for it. You've got to prepare. If it's bad news, it's bad news. You just got to do that. And what you really are saying, and I think this is so powerful, is I am educating them. I'm not waiting till I'm in trouble to educate them, because they won't listen to me then. So even if they don't read my information, I love the way you said, hey, I've been sharing it for months, quarters.
Mm-hmm.
That's great.
Exactly.
That's powerful. Powerful.
And it's nice also to consider, do this in a very visual format, make it as easily consumable as possible, so that you increase the likelihood someone will at least look at some of it, Dean. But anecdotally, I had a leader come to me and say, I know what everyone on my team is working on. At any given point in time, I can go into this general bucket of time and I can break it apart for you. And I had to say to her, if you are asked to do that and you go and do it, it's already too late.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter whether you know it then or not, or if you're 100% accurate or not at that point. You've already lost the credibility. So we have to break this information out on the front end so that I can be regularly feeding the information to the appropriate individuals.
Yeah. No, I like that a lot.
Yeah. So, when we turn to utilization, how have we done this? I mean, obviously, everyone uses some sort of professional services automation software as a way to track their time. But one of the big challenges that we're faced with in our organization is that we do a number of things for a number of other departments, because we are the foremost product experts in our organization. So anytime you need product expertise, who do you come to? Come to the professional services team and say, hey, we need you to test this, or we need you to create a video about this in our education team, or we need you to be able to get on a free seminar with a customer. All of this is valuable organizational work. It must be accounted for. But the problem is we're a profit center and none of that is profitable. And so a big part of what I focused on in the first 9 months of the role was really nailing down what is all of that work? Who is it we're doing the work for? And trying to think of utilization, not just in terms of external utilization. What's our internal utilization? Who are we doing this work for? And what is that work? And then now what I'm presently working on is a more proactive approval of that work by the column leads. So, yes, we're going to keep doing all this work for you, but what I need you to do is tell me in advance that this is what you want my people to do for you and approve the amount of time and the amount of money that it would cost us to do that for you.
Just like a client.
Just like a client. Exactly. And they love it. That's the key, is that they have been getting a check for this at the end of a quarter. Hey, here's the bill. And we never asked them what they wanted to buy. It'd be the equivalent of me coming to you, Dean, and saying, hey, I can fix your car, but I'm not going to tell you how much it's going to cost you. I just need you to pay me when I'm done. It might be $5. It could be $10,000.
I may not even know you're fixing my car.
Right.
You came over in the middle of the night.
Exactly.
Fix my car.
Exactly. But you still get a bill.
Yeah.
And you still owe us, by the way. So, what we're now doing is we're giving them a proactive view into what they're paying for from our organization and the ability to say, nah, I don't want to pay for that. Awesome. Then we don't have to do it. And my team I'm trying to educate my team that no, things don't have to happen. They only have to happen if your senior vice president says that they're valuable to the organization. Because everyone in professional services is where they are because they like to serve clients. So the answer quite frequently from people is, no, we have to do this thing. No, we don't necessarily have to do it. There are consequences potentially for not doing it, but those consequences will be taken on by the broader organization when we make the decision not to do them. And instead, we can spend our time more productively in other places. So it's given us the ability to more actively think about the work we're doing before we're doing it. And because we're providing the information and the approval on the front end, what we end up doing is aligning better, and we're less doing this. We're not doing this conflict thing as much anymore. And instead, it's like Hoshin Kanri, if you're familiar with the concept. It's the point of the arrow. It's a Japanese concept, whereas everyone's pointed in the right direction. You achieve a lot more. It's like if you have everyone doing tug of war, but they're all pulling in different directions. Well, right now, instead of pulling in different directions, we're all pulling the rope in the same direction, and it's having a huge impact overall on the organization. It's creating a multiplicative effect in the ability for us to get work done as an organization.
I like that you didn't go against what's needed. Instead, you made us aware of what we're using, and we may be right to use it, we may be wrong to use it. I also, talking about professional services that have an expertise, they love to show off their expertise. So it's not even we love to serve, we like to feel important.
Yeah.
Like you couldn't go anywhere else and get this. I'm the only guy that knows this. Yeah.
Yeah.
Strange.
Yeah. Right. And that is our value proposition. I mean, that is like, if you were to lay it out, the reason why you don't outsource this role is that you wouldn't find someone else in the marketplace that had the same product expertise that my folks do. And they're very good at what they do. We just need to make sure that they're actually spending their time on the thing that provides the organization the most value. And I will say, I am almost certain that if I come back and I talk to you 6 months from now, after this has become business as usual, this approval process and refocusing of our efforts, you'll find that people are happier. I bet people are more empowered because they recognize that all the way up the leadership chain, the thing they're doing has been approved and valued. And so now they don't end up in this space where they say, gosh, I spent 20 hours last quarter doing this thing and no one cared. Instead, no, everyone's going to care. You're pointed right in the same direction as everybody else. You're providing a lot of value for the organization.
Also, it's nipping in the bud. I don't know if that's a term anymore, but you're nipping in the bud. Another thing that people do. So I'm a vertical in this scenario. I don't know my people don't know how to do that. I don't know I'm not building some of the capability I need. I don't know they're relying on maybe they're being lazy. Maybe they, and you see it in no offense to the sales people that we participate with, but we all have known people who I just want to get them to the expert. I don't want to. I just want the expert to come in and it's not really a deal. I'm gone, right?
Yeah.
Instead of
Right.
owning, and you see that, and so I think it also causes that senior executive, and I'm sure they're good to say, well, wait a minute here. I got a list of 30 things we use them for. 10 of them great, but these other 20, I thought my people could do that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think this is true. This resonates to a lot of people in software today. This is just a recent change that our customer success organization was always considered uh, the experts. They were there to help customers be successful. All commercial went elsewhere. Where I just saw an article from TSIA today that 67% of customer success managers now have a sales goal. So we're now seeing 2/3 of CS having a sales goal. And I can speak to my organization that the amount of work we're asking these people to do is phenomenal. It's huge. So they don't have the time anymore in a lot of cases to be the expert that they used to have the time to be. And I don't want to place that expectation on them because that's not good for my organization right now. And so we want to help them, but we need to be able to very clearly state this is the time, this is the value, this is the thing we did that helped you with a renewal. Because otherwise what happens is someone in finance says you don't make as much money as you spend, you need to go. Instead,
Oh,
now
every
what I'll
day, all
have
day.
is a picture, I'll have a really clear picture, Dean, of exactly the value, and we're getting it down to the customer level. Let me show you, almost like allocated cost accounting, this is the time we spent on this customer that ended up being a $50 million renewal.
Oh, it is. It is cost accounting. It's just maybe not hitting the accounting system, but
Right.
um,
Right.
no, I think that's very rich and very important. I like the negative blowback that it gives an executive to grow up. I'd be interested over time in how do our on customer success. By the way, just a second. Customer success is not what we all planned it to be, and we could do a whole event on that because, um, yeah, it's not going to drive customer. PS drives customer success. Okay, there you go. But I'd be interested on the PS people over a period of time on do they begin to not want to do some of those activities and want to do more billable. I mean, I wonder how there's a migration or non-migration there.
I mean, I feel like that might be a whole conversation that we could have, Dean, but I will tell you just anecdotally, the sales goal that CS has sometimes leads to resent in professional services. I got on the phone call, I helped out, they made a big commission, I did not. And so now we can get into like, and I've talked to you about this one-on-one, Dean, the concept of incentive systems and the incentive you drive is extremely important to the holistic view of an organization. And I believe that most organizations don't spend enough time thinking about the nuance of how they incentivize behaviors and what it leads to. Earlier in our conversation, you mentioned sales and potentially passing off to experts. This is the same concept as well, is that sometimes I just want to get paid, I just want to hit my quota, it leads to potentially negative behaviors. Not always, not everyone's that way, but there are
No.
situations.
Unfortunately, we do what we're paid. We're chasing our. I mean, and so one thing, a piece of data that we've tracked for many clients is what we call the shadow revenue. Let me show you the revenue that PS is driving.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yes.
Just as a revenue number, we were involved in 50 deals. The 50 deals drove that much. It's not talking about my utilization there. It's talking about, let's examine would we have got those 50 deals. And you'll find, and I think you find this, normally the bigger, more complex, more valuable deals required more PS time.
We have a deal that just closed this last quarter that took 100 hours of scoping work from my team.
Mm-hmm.
And we did not sell that extra time, by the way. We actually discounted the implementation from what it was estimated at. So this is where we start talking about that conflict between the columns and the rows, is that we will probably as an organization end up underwater on this particular project, but it was a highly complicated government situation. And as we all know, dealing with governments is very challenging. And their situation is complicated. And so we wanted to do the right thing for them. And we did, which is the good news. But the bad news is it just takes a lot of time and effort.
So that example there is even closer to the more natural and logical tie-in from a PS individual. I can go in, I can support a deal that will win us some professional services work downstream. So I'm growing the PS pie, even if we're doing it less profitably. You start taking that steps away from an actual deal or an opportunity that we're supporting client to winning a renewal that doesn't come with necessarily any more PS work, to doing internal consulting projects perhaps, or doing something in and
helping
around
the product team.
helping the product team with enhancements or filling engineering gaps. Right. Absolutely. The incentive structure matters so much there, because you're getting further and further removed from both how they're compensated and what they, despite wanting to solve problems, what they're truly passionate about, which is solving a client's problem and helping them be successful.
And as you and I've talked about, what they need to be good at.
Yeah.
Right? What we need to be good at, and the client management and everything. So listen, this has been a great first opportunity to get together this way. What I'd love to know, and if Anthony, if you have another question, we'll definitely take it. I'd like to know, what would you like us to take away from this today? And by the way, fantastic. Very good information, very good for the community. Thank you.
Sure. If I were going to sum it up, really think about how you measure data, how you present that data, and the frequency with which you present it. So be as visual as you can, be as detailed as you can, but also give it before you need to give it. And then use that information to drive the conversations, because almost always senior leaders love data. And when they see it, they're much more likely to say, hey, this doesn't make sense. We need to change it. Whereas if you just go to someone and say, man, we do a lot of work for you and you don't take care of us, the answer you're going to get is, well, what do you do? So you got to use that data, use it frequently, and use it and as visually as you possibly can. And it will help you align and lead to much, much better conversations.
Mike, thank you so much. And one thing, you never blow your own horn. You also have a servant's heart, and the way you address management and everything made them buy in, as opposed to here's the data, damn it, you're screwing me over, right? It's just amazing. And thank you so much for your time today.
Sure, thank you.
We look forward to seeing you again.
Awesome. I appreciate it. Have a good one.
You know, we've added a new feature in our podcast series. We've gotten a lot of feedback, or it's going to be just some feedback, that we should take some time and recap after the podcast, and then maybe illuminate through some experiences we've had. And so we're going to do that. We're starting that with the podcast, Michael Turner's podcast. This will get more congealed, more connected over time as we do them right after the podcast. So, but today we're going to take the stuff that Michael shared with us and try to tell you our takeaways, and then spend a little time talking about how we've seen that in the marketplace before.
Yeah. And so, I think there were a couple of key takeaways. We summarized some of these at the end of the call with Michael. I think this gives us a little bit more freedom to go back and forth on our perspective of these topics that we've seen other places as well. I think Michael did a good job of really capturing what I took away is to be his key challenge that he found a nice way of solving for, which is the free work that sometimes the professional services team is asked to do on behalf of the organization, right? Whether that's internal utilization, whether that's free work, and it looks like a bunch of, it comes across in a couple of different ways, but I think Michael did a very nice job summarizing how he's solved the, hey, let's leverage some data and some information to make sure that we're addressing this.
Yeah, I think almost every time, or so often when we deal with a SaaS entity, that they really didn't strategically think about PS's role and what are we doing with them and where the boundaries are, and these companies move fast when they're initially growing. They either move fast or they don't, right? They're just gone. Who is that company? So anyway, they're moving faster on this, and so we hear this all the time, right? I'm giving away free work, or my people are being pulled off on internal, even advisory to development, just all this churn. But also, I think it manifests itself in examples of I can't get more people because they don't understand everything I do, but also the value I drive. We're not measuring the shadow revenue that I create, and so and we obviously have a passion for getting it right and treating PS wonderfully, right? That's our whole career and everything. But I was thinking of examples that we've seen, and we were dealing with a relatively big software entity, and they were wrestling with what's our mission, right? Is our mission really expansion in the account? Because in their case, and I've seen this too, their customer success group wasn't really trained, held accountable for getting the product across the organization.
Yeah.
So PS was playing that role, and that meant PS had some people that didn't really fit in PS. So we had this kind of thing going on, and they had already tried a couple of times to get management bought in, and so the idea of be calm, be analytical, provide data, ask questions. That's the perfect road, right? And in this case, they had already tried 2 roads, and they were kind of behind the 8 ball because management was tired of hearing about it, right? I don't want to hear this stuff anymore. You just get out there and do what we tell you to do. And that's a tough spot to be in.
Well, yeah. Too often it's viewed as you're making excuses to try and overcome something that you've been trying to make the case for without the data and the information. And I think Michael's point was, hey, before I ever even tried to make the case for changing something, I'm going to start tracking and using some of this information, reporting out to them, letting the business leaders know how my scarce resources are being allocated across things they may or may not even be aware of. And I think that, right, having a vision for setting the stage to make those requests and have those conversations is really important.
And this is something we teach all consultants to do with their clients.
Yeah.
Don't wait till there's a problem. Tell them what problems are going to happen. So what he did, which I think is magic, is I'm not even asking for anything yet. I'm educating you about how it works. Therefore, when the crisis or the comment or my need comes into play, you've already been provided. Now, maybe you're not reading it. Maybe you're not attending the meetings. But as he even used this as an example, I go, I've been sending that to you for weeks and weeks and weeks. So I thought that was just super.
Yeah, and so I think that's usable for that whole tactic is usable for a bunch of different things, not just this topic of how are my people spending their time and how do I make sure that I get the best use out of my scarce resources. The thing that's interesting, and we've run into this in a couple of different instances, is everybody's tracking their time. Every organization has some sort of system, whether it's on a spreadsheet in the early days all the way through the any PSA system. The time tracking aspect of it is so often categorized as we care a lot about the billable utilization side of things. How are my hours being tracked to certain clients, to certain projects, to certain activities, so that we can make sure that we're managing profitability of those engagements? And then there's non-billable utilization, right? In a lot of cases, it's just those 2 big buckets, and the granularity is always on the billable utilization side of things, and they set utilization targets and all of this stuff. But having a couple of extra layers that you can then filter out to say, all right, what's truly non-billable time? What is the kind of billable time, but it's not billed to a client? What are some training and internal development type activities? What are some internal projects that you're supporting, whether that's pre-sales support, whether that's helping the customer success team? Just having a lot of those categories for your non-billable utilization that you can then disaggregate later gives you all the data that you can actually then go.
Yeah, it's not hard to get the data if you'll have some discipline.
If you set some structure in and all the systems allow for it, right? You set all that stuff up in advance rather than just
sending it way ahead, highlighting it. But also when you way back when PS began to be really important to some tech firms, I always feel like we got to remember and have some empathy, and this helps with that Everybody else in this company has no idea what we do.
They read somewhere, hey, our consultants are supposed to be at 80% billable. I know what
Yeah, some consultant.
The math
some
is,
consultants.
the math is really easy. 80%. I know what we're paying these people.
Yeah,
It should be generating this revenue.
Yeah, and don't you have a process?
And
for
can't you squeeze a little bit more out of it?
Yeah. So educating them and pre-educating, I think that's just great. So just in quick summary on our time with Michael, I thought he was incredibly clear.
Yeah.
And matter of fact, we like this so much, we're embedding this in our practice management training now. That to get on board of, what are the things I should be tracking? How do I track them? How do I educate? How far ahead? How do I highlight? I think that's and we just want to thank Mike so much for coming on and helping us.
Yeah, thanks, Mike.